Good day, everyone. Hello.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Jeffrey. Nice to see you. Thank you for
Good
joining
day.
us.
Thank you.
Uh,
Nice to see you.
Thank you, everyone. As we're seeing more people come in, welcome to our funding Flora session around cultivating ESO scale up for lasting impact. We're very happy again to be partnering with DGGF and iGravity around a session where we're helping kind of solve some of these challenges around how ESOs can grow. And we're here to learn about the insights that DGF and iGravity have gathered through their interviews around the challenges that ESOs face. And we're here to also see how much this has been experienced by all of you on this call. So thank you again so much for joining us. And as usual, as we like to start here on Pollinate, we have our check-in. So Madura, if we can please bring up our mentee. While we're doing that, I'm sorry, I just realized I didn't introduce myself. Hi, I'm Rod. I am the community choreographer of Pollinate Impact, joining you all from Manila. So it's a pretty nice kind of gloomy afternoon, but nice weather. So I hope everybody's also having a pretty good day so far. All right, if we can. I think this is the wrong slide. Let me just, if we can update Madura. Yeah. I think I linked you to the right one. Maybe while we're waiting on the chat, if you all want to say hello to each other, your name, where you're from, where you're joining us from, that would be great. So I see a few people. Awesome to see you here. We can start from the beginning, Madura. Yes, a lot of familiar names. Hi, Paul. Nice to see you. Jeff is here from Malawi. Raja, thank you. Awesome. So we have our mentee up on screen. You can use the code 1659. Awesome. So we have Switzerland, Netherlands. Great. DRC, I see some on the chat. Nairobi, Kenya, Cameroon. Awesome. Cambodia. Great. Awesome. We can have a few more responses on the mentee. Kenya. Awesome. Singapore. Great. Palestine. Welcome. Kenya. Oh, I love the use of the emojis. Great. Malawi. All right. Awesome. Okay, so we have a few people on the mentee. Madura, if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so just wanted to know who's in the room. So we have conveners here, 2 consultants are here, funder and donor, incubators and accelerators. Awesome. Community hubs. Great. Awesome to see that we are a mixed group today. It's great to hear and great to see. All right. Awesome. If we can go to the next slide. Right. First question for our check-in. What's the biggest challenge you think that ESOs in your area face? So funding, definitely something that we've heard a few times, and I think is something that is a reality for a lot of people. Sustainability, so sustainable business models, so in connection to funding, but more around how to create these revenue streams. I'm assuming pipeline and recruitment, so around talent over-dependency on grants and donor funding, on-ground presence and local context. Can we scroll down, Madura, to the bottom? Awesome. Transitioning to sustainable business models. I see Paul. Growth scale, sustainable and impact-driven models, funding access. Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for wonderful answers. Let's go to the next slide, Madura. So we see the challenges. What do you think is missing in terms of support for ESOs to thrive? A supporting ecosystem. Funding opportunities, ecosystem. Strong backbone, organizational health, government buy-in, unrestricted long-term funding, stakeholders will understand what we do. Definitely important. All right, awesome. Let's go to the next one, Madura. Mentor networks. Okay, because we have a mixed bag, right? So we also want to know on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not very effective to 10 being highly effective, how effective do you think ESOs are at what they do, or how you understand what they do? A 10. A little biased on Paul's end, but I'm sure they do a very effective job. So I'll take your word for it, Paul. A 7.
Rod, I think on our side, it's on the Menti, I can't seem to submit a number. So I think maybe people could just shout out or put in the chat.
Thanks, Ariel. Thanks for letting me know.
Just this question. I think the other ones were fine.
Right. Okay, great. So if you can just comment your answers. Okay, so we have a few coming in. 9, 7, 6 varies per provider. Depends on the ecosystem. 6.5. So somewhere in the middle, a little towards the end of like effective. But of course, there's still room for improvement. So that's what I'm seeing so far. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Madura, let's go to the next slide. This is the last question. I think what's one thing ESOs do well that should be scaled up? So we're seeing how the numbers are, 6, 7. And so we still see that there's some effectiveness to what ESOs do. So in terms of that, what do we think should be scaled up from what they're doing well? Community building, understanding challenges in the ecosystem, data collection. Great. Anything else? Peer support, definitely very important. Just offer and model based on outcomes. Peer support. Data collection, helping funders prepare for growth. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Madura, for putting the Menti up. This is great. This is a great way for us to start our conversation and really get our minds kind of going about how we can all work together as an ecosystem and in making sure that, ESOs also are as effective in the ways that they do and support entrepreneurs. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Julia Cole from Triple Jump / the Dutch Good Growth Fund to help us get to know a little bit more about this project and what the program is about. So Julia.
Yes, thank you so much, Rod, and hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to exchange on our work. For those of you I didn't have the chance yet to speak with, my name is Julia Ko. I've been with Triple Jump, which is a responsible investment manager for almost 10 years now. With me today, we will hear from Morgan, Michael, and Lukman. They are all from the iGravity team. iGravity is an advisory firm specialized in impact investing and innovative financing for development. So we have basically partnered with them to try to bring our work with ESOs to the next frontier. If we move to the key objectives for today. Today, what we want to do is to basically present to you a bit of our vision for a multi-funder program that contributes to scale up the ESO sector in emerging markets. We have done market system assessments in 5 different markets, and we have also done with the team at iGravity, kind of a mapping exercise of all the initiatives to support ESO. So we want to present basically these findings to you and hopefully validate them, or if there is anything we missed or got wrong, please do tell us. And the last point is to really kind of exchange and get insight onto the kind of the key components we should focus on when it comes to scaling up. And one of the things why we're doing it is really to find like-minded partners to do this work. And maybe it's a good moment to move to the vision. Basically, we have for that I explained to you also a bit where everything is coming from. So as I said, I work for Triple Jump, and one of the funds we manage and I've been mostly focusing on is called the Dutch Good Growth Fund. It invests in a variety of local finance providers, so SME finance is more adequately available to SMEs in emerging markets. And so in some markets where investment opportunities are limited due to the nascent entrepreneurial ecosystem, especially in terms of business development support, or in markets where the financial sector is developing and diversifying, but pipeline remains an issue, I saw someone mention that earlier, there is a role to play basically in developing the ESOs. So over the past 7 years, we committed in total 5 million euros to support 15 ESOs. These 15 ESOs have supported 1,000 enterprises, which contributed to create and support 5,000 jobs. And these companies raised external commercial funding in a total amount of 25 million euro. All the ESOs we have supported still operate today, and on average, the self-sustainability ratio we get is 64%. So it's a non-negligible impact. We are quite happy with it, but to be honest, it's a drop in the ocean, if I may. What we see, and why I say that, is that overall in the sector, we observe that the quality of the outcomes and the impact of the ESOs vary greatly from one organization to another and from one country to another. The system is underperforming, if you will. So last year, we set ourselves to better understand the system of ESOs, to address what is not performing, and hopefully do that with like-minded ESOs and ESO funders. So if we get to the next slide, what we did, and we've engaged with the Pollinating Impact community on, is we first focused on designing a result-based finance instrument to incentivize positive outcomes and impact while fostering the financial sustainability of ESOs. We actually had a lot of discussion around what financial sustainability means for ESOs. At the moment, we kind of are set on the following definition. So it's the capacity of the ESO to cover its recurring and rationalized operating costs through predictable revenue streams without relying on restricted short-term grants. Our partner ESOs that we have supported in the past, they really appreciate our long-term and non-restricted support that is focused on ensuring execution capacity of their core business, and also the space to innovate and test business models. But we believe that with a result-based finance instrument, we may be able to help them transform faster by better aligning the incentives among the funder, the ESO, and the entrepreneur. So if you will, the success of the entrepreneur makes the success of the ESO, that makes the success of its funder. So providing a result-based finance instrument gives an ESO the space and mandate to focus on enhancing their service offering as a quality and cost-efficient product that others will buy into. So we equip them with the knowledge and know-how to monitor and amplify outcomes and impact. So impact versus inputs and outputs. And at the same time, they can validate efficiently a sustainable business model. To us, as we are managing public funds, it actually represents a great opportunity to see if we cannot actually better use the public funding in a more efficient and wise way to actually reward the ESOs to the extent to which they reach the agreed upon performance level. So we are now piloting the first 2 result-based finance partnerships, so with 2 accelerators that we notably identify through the Pollinate impact community. So we are really grateful for that. And so these pilots will be over 1 year, and we are now engaging on a year of exchanging our learnings to see if we could identify especially like-minded ESO funders that will want to collaborate with us by committing our common resourcing to fixing the ESO system. So how can we support these ESOs in a more meaningful manner that ensures quality outcomes of their program, an expanded impact, and contributes to the financial sustainability of the sector? That's what we are looking at. And that's basically the work we have been starting with iGravity, and that we'll present to you today. So now I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues at iGravity to take you through basically the outcomes of the work we have done this year.
Thanks a lot, Julia, and welcome from my side as well. So my name is Morgan, and I'm working for iGravity. And as Julia was saying, so now we are in this second part of the graph that we are sharing, so the ESO scale-up program. And today, what we want to focus on is to present you the findings of this market system assessment that we did. So we look at 5 countries, which are Colombia, Vietnam, Morocco, Senegal, and Kenya. And we did also this initiative mapping. And before going into the findings that Michael and Lukman will present, we would like to go quickly through the methodology so that you understand a bit our approach. So let me share quickly the slides. And here I'm focusing on the methodology for this market system assessment that we did in the 5 countries. And we took a 3-step approach. So starting really by looking at the ESO system and looking at the constraints and the root causes of the constraints within the ecosystem. For that, we use what we call a market system development approach. I will explain you what is the meaning of this approach. And we look at 4 core dimensions. And then based on this really rigorous research work, we identified what we call leverage points, which are factors that if you fix, you can have a bigger impact in unlocking the root causes of constraints within the system. And based on this leverage point, we will define intervention, which will be really the entry point for this scale-up program that Julia mentioned. And today we are not going in the solution part. We are really taking you through the step 1 and 2 and making sure that we understood clearly the constraints and that we agree on the leverage point. And based on that, we'll go in the solution part. So quickly on the market system development approach, so what it is and why we have chosen to use that. So how does it work? You can look here at the bottom of the slides. So the way we do it is that for each of the market that we mentioned, we look at the ecosystem of the ESO. So really, who are the actors? What are the constraints that they are facing? And what are the root causes behind these constraints? And really, with these rigorous and robust approaches, we managed to identify what we call the leverage point. And what is different from other type of approaches is that we really try to empower local and catalyze local solutions. So we are not coming with an external solution to a problem. We look at what the root causes are and who are the best actors to address these root causes within the ecosystem. And the third aspect, which is really interesting in this MSD, is that when you start applying this approach, you acknowledge that the constraints that you try to fix are quite complex. So you are really having a learning agenda, which is really strong, so that you always iterate and improve the approaches as you go. And why we like this approach is that it really enable a project to become more sustainable, because we are not looking at the symptom, but really at the root causes. And you can achieve impact at scale by finding this leverage point. And we'll go in detail on who those are. And really quickly as well, so when we did this ESO system assessment, we decided to focus on 4 systemic hurdles, which are the one that were mentioned also in the first survey that we did at the beginning of the webinar. The first one being the financial sustainability. So how do we make sure that we can help the ESO to go beyond the traditional donor funding? The second one is looking at data transparency. How do we make sure that the data is circulating from the entrepreneur to the ESO and then to the donors? We will look also at the public-private collaboration. So how do we make sure that we can attract new type of partners to the ESO world? So attracting the government, the corporates, etc. And the last one is looking at human resources. So how do we make sure that the ESO have the right people and the right team in place and the capacity to retain these persons? And with that, so now you have the context of how we approach the work. And with that, I would like to hand over to Michael so that he can lead you through the findings.
Cool. Thank you, Morgan. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Cameron from iGravity as well. So we're going to go through the initial findings for the ESO system analysis. Just to caveat, I think a lot of the constraints we've identified resonate with a lot of the literature we see out there, a lot of the comments we've gotten from interviews. So they might not necessarily be new, but what we are interested is starting the conversation and being very action oriented when it comes to these constraints. So that when you're to the point that Morgan made, when we're developing solutions that are context specific, they do kind of address and the problems facing these systems and are sustainable long term beyond the lifetime of the project. So the first bit for us, next slide. So we started first by looking at the ESO systems themselves. This ESO system analysis was conducted across 5 countries. That's Colombia, Kenya, Senegal, Morocco, and Vietnam. And for us, it was important to see who are the key actors within that system. And we split them into 3 categories. So the middle one is the key function. Do ESOs exist? And do they provide actual relevant services to enterprises within that system? Secondly, looking at the supporting functions that enable the effective functioning of the service itself. So infrastructure, skills development, information sharing, etc. And lastly, whether there are enabling policies, regulations to ensure that the system is conducive and active. And I think just at a high level, what we found across all five countries is the system does exist. However, there is varied levels of performance when it comes to all 3 categories. I think, as we saw in the previous slide, funding and financial services remain to be a thorn in most of the ESO systems, and especially when we speak about local financial services, and we see primarily it's donor funding. And from a regulatory perspective, despite the role that ESOs play in private sector development, we still don't see that level of recognition, whether it's from a policy perspective or having formal networks set up to support or advocate for the industry at large. Next slide. And so once we looked at the systems themselves, we then zoomed in to try and see where the bottlenecks or failures were within these ESO systems. And they've been categorized across these 4 key hurdles that we as iGravity have come across previously, as well as our partners, and also from previous literature that we find are constantly recurrent. The first one on financial sustainability. Again, I think it's a big topic in the ESO space, and the fact that a lot of the markets depend on donors when it comes to funding. And this also means a lot of the strategic direction that ESOs take is determined by donors, not always by the local needs of the ESO system. Secondly, from a human resource perspective, linked to financial sustainability, financial limitations that ESOs have mean that they're not always able to compete for the best talent within the ecosystems that they operate in. And even when that talent is available, there still remains a lot of gaps from a technical perspective. In terms of offering actual structured technical, especially when it comes to very niche enterprise support areas. Thirdly, I think data transparency and breeding that culture of using data for decision making is something that we still see is nascent. And beyond it being very new in the ecosystem, we also find it is something that's funded. I think when you list the different priorities that an ESO has, unfortunately, data systems and sharing of data becomes a very low priority when you need to pay overheads, pay salaries, just to keep the business running. And lastly, I think on public-private collaboration, despite, again, the impact that ESOs have on private sector development, we still do not see the level of recognition that we'd expect, both from government and the clear lack of regulatory frameworks and incentives, and also from corporates, where as much as we do find that they are active in the system, a lot of the supports ends up being superficial in a way. So a few sponsorship deals or attending prizes, awards. And in some ecosystems, we see corporates internalizing the ESO service into the organizations and providing the service rather than partnering with the ESOs, private ESOs, that is. And so that's like an overview of the key trends we see across all 5 countries. However, despite seeing these constraints in each of the country, how they manifest and the magnitude of that challenge in each country varies. And we have some examples at the bottom. I'll pick just a few. When it comes to financial sustainability, one of the topics we've seen emerge strongly is the type of ESO. And we classify them into the service-only ESO, so those that provide mostly the business development support without any investment-linked service attached. And these ones, we find they tend to be more donor-dependent, and they're mostly common in countries like in Morocco, Senegal, and Kenya. However, in Vietnam and Colombia, we do see other funding models and mechanisms, especially around equity stakes and revenue sharing, emerge present, and also emerging in Morocco and Kenya. Another example is around public-private collaboration. I think in Colombia, despite collaboration still being a challenge, we see government trying to have an active role when it comes to enterprise development. Whereas in Vietnam, I think certain restrictive regulatory frameworks tend to hinder that enterprise development. And I think it's an area where we can still do a bit more in trying to improve that engagement. Next slide. And so I think the next big insight for us was, yes, we have this, we discuss these constraints individually. However, in practice, it's actually a web, and all the system handles are interconnected, and one symptom doesn't just affect one corner of the ESO system, but might have a ripple effect across the whole system. And we provide a few examples on this slide. So even as we talk about ESOs having an over-reliance on restrictive and short-term donor funding, and trying to nudge them to explore alternative funding streams, it's also important to recognize, do they have the necessary talent and human resource internally to develop or implement those strategies? Do they have the necessary data systems internally to track the performance and be able to actually justify this investment to its local financiers or international ones? And lastly, do they have the right partnerships with relevant actors in the system to push for this diversification? So for us, I think the big kind of realization moving forward is, it's not just about picking one or two constraints and saying this is what we're going to look at, but it's really having a holistic view, as we show in the next slide, where we look at the whole system from a constraints perspective and determine what factors within this system do we think have the most influence in the underperformance. And in the next slide, so we call these factors our leverage points. So if we focus on a specific factor and we incentivize some behavioral change in that factor, we hope that it's going to untangle this web that we see. Otherwise, we feel that if you just focus on one constraint or one symptom, you might address that individual pain point, but not fully address the bottlenecks facing that specific ESO system. And we have 4 leverage points that we aim to look at as part of the program, and wish that you guys could provide us your views on as well. The first one is around financial diversification. So finding alternative business revenue models, that is, that are a bit more predictable. The second one is on program quality. So ensuring that stakeholders are satisfied with the type of service that ESOs provide and are more willing to engage with ESOs. Secondly, is stakeholder collaboration. So being able to build the networks in terms of sharing information and learning, but also being able to unlock complementary local resources towards ecosystem enhancement. And lastly, ensuring there's a standardized data collection and reporting mechanisms and repositories that help you collectively as a system to be able to know where we are and what we need to do to move to the next stage in terms of development. Thank you. So I think I'll pause at this stage and pass it on to Lukman to give us an overview of the initiatives.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, so for the initiatives mapping, just taking a step back, the vision is that we aim to establish this coalition of funders that support initiatives, right? And the idea is, how can we highlight key trends within the ecosystem? Who are the funders? What are the thematic areas? What programs are they focusing on? How are they implementing these programs? Understanding this. You can't hear me well? Okay.
It's a little muffled, Lukman.
All right, I'll try being louder. But yeah, as I was saying, for these initiatives, we're trying to highlight some of the key trends for the funders, just to sort of tie it back to the main vision, where we're trying to understand who can we partner with basically for this vision that we have. So the initiatives mapping, if we go to the next slide, is basically trying to highlight this. And in no way is this comprehensive, in that we mapped all the initiatives that exist. It's just a sample of 28 initiatives. And we looked at the funders and the initiatives themselves. In terms of funders, we saw that there are 46 funders supporting ESO and the entrepreneurship ecosystem at large. And the top 3 funders, in terms of financial commitment, who's putting in the most money is FD, Visa Foundation, and FCDO. And in terms of participation in initiatives, who's collaborating more, who's doing more initiatives, we have the Agiges Foundation, FCDO again, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. And the initiatives that we mapped in total, we see 4.15 billion euros that has gone out to the initiatives. And of course, there is a slight, I'd say, skew towards FD, who's putting most money for the Choose Africa program, for those who know it. Most of the initiatives are also single donor. So one of the key priority areas for us within this project is to highlight the multi-donor initiatives as well, because we want to have this, again, coalition of funders. And in terms of the support where it goes, it's good that we see there's almost an equal balance of where the support goes. Some programs focus on ESO only, 29%, 32% enterprises and only, and then 39% focuses sort of both. But we'll see the funding skew in the next slide. So we're highlighting these 4 priority areas for this presentation, but we're also studying the structure of these initiatives in order to inform how we come up with a coalition. But for today's presentation, we just look at these 4 key areas in terms of the key trends. Starting off with the funders, we see bilateral donors and foundations dominate the landscape with limited support from multilateral agencies. And most of the initiatives are small scale. So we see the funding is below 10 million, and typically it's led by a single donor. However, the notable exception that I mentioned earlier, we have one program with a target size of $3.5 billion, and this is the Choose Africa program by AFD. In terms of the thematic focus, it's good to see that ecosystem strengthening is emerging as a top priority. There's no like single focus on various themes. Generally, the initiatives try to get to sort of leverage the whole ecosystem as a top priority, so that we've seen the pie chart before where all the 2 actors and both actors, so the ESOs and the enterprises, are being targeted. The thematic areas, it's cross-cutting within these programs, because sometimes also the funders somehow influence the focus of the program. If a funder typically has a youth strategy, climate strategy, gender strategy, and it's a coalition of funders, they sort of put in their thought into the design of the program. And we see that the cross-cutting themes are favored over sector-specific initiatives. In terms of the target group, again, we see it's evenly distributed across 3, right? We have the ESOs and enterprises, the ESOs only and enterprise only. But the funding is heavily concentrated on programs that benefit both ESOs and enterprises. And the ESO only programs receive only 0.4% of the total funding. I mean, within the both ESOs and enterprises, there is some funding that goes to them, but still, it's not that much. Speaking to some of the funders, they see it as a leverage point, right? The ESOs are a leverage point for impact to the enterprises. So already with that sort of, let's say, mentality, there's a slight bias in terms of how do you allocate the funding. And finally, in terms of the support offered, so you see they deploy technical assistance, financing, and some form of research and learning for these initiatives. And for the enterprises who are beneficiaries of these programs, they typically receive combined TA and financing. And the financing is primarily grants. And in terms of the TA, almost all programs have an element of mentorship and networking within them. And then these specialized support areas are kind of lacking, right? In programs, some programs offer the expertise, but most do not. So climate expertise, financial training, detailed training on business development, market expansion, scale, etc., is not there. It's it's there, but very minimal. For the ESOs, they predominantly receive technical assistance. So you can see the financing component is lacking for the ESOs. And the focus again is on networking, a bit of business development and service delivery training, but fundraising, talent development remain underrepresented in these support areas. So yeah, that would be it from my end.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Morgan, Lukman, and Michael for your presentation. Sorry, there we go. Awesome. So let us go to the exciting interactive activity part of our session today. So as we've heard the insights coming from the interviews that the iGravity team has done, we'd like to know how this also reflects on your experiences as different stakeholder groups and also as different stakeholders who come from different regions. So for our first breakout today, we'd like to break out into specific stakeholder groups, which are ESOs. 1, 2 is funders/investors. And then the third group is entrepreneurs/others. We give you the right to self-determination, which one fits you the best in terms of your stakeholder group. So we'll be opening the breakout rooms and then we'll have questions there that will be led by facilitators where you'll answer and then we'll get to discuss some of these challenges together and deepen our understanding. So Aditi, if we can please open our breakout rooms. We'll have 15 minutes. So if you all see there is a join a breakout room and then you'll see 3 breakout rooms. Just click the one that best describes your organization and we will see you there. Thank you. Great. Seeing everybody moving.
Madora, I don't know what I'm not seeing the prompt to join. What did I miss something or?
I don't see it as well.
Madora, are
Camille,
you able to?
Where do you guys want to join? I'll just assign Ariel, which group?
So I am supposed to be in with funders and investors, and
Sending
so
you
is
there.
Morgan.
Okay, transport.
Thank
Hold
you.
on.
thanks.
Morgan, just hold on.
Got it. Thank you.
Funders, right?
Yes.
Sending you. Okay. Anyone else facing problem?
Yeah, me too. Nikita here.
Yeah, where should I assign you?
Yeah, funders.
Okay. Okay. What about Niece and where should I assign you?
You and I will need to be here. I think if Dennis or Beju want to be assigned to rooms, just let us. Hi, Beju. Is there a room that you'd like to be assigned to? We can send you over. Hi, if anyone would like to be assigned to a breakout room, just let us know here or on chat, and we can send you over.
Oh man, I was typing a message in the chat and I must have dumped myself out of the group. I thought our breakup room was over. It said, and it was like, leave now or leave in 40 seconds. So anyway, nice to meet you, Pollinate Impact team.
So great to see you again.
Yeah.
I hope you had a great discussion in your breakout room. Is it the funder breakout room that you were in?
Yeah. So I wear two hats, ESO and funder, and the report's spot on. Like it's just, and then look, when I've been working with Lucas at iGravity, looking at a model in Southeast Asia for blended finance model where ESOs are at the center of loan management and deployment. So it was just, yeah, perfect.
We're back. Hopefully, it did not cut some great conversations. I'm sure if we had more time, there would have been deeper insights, but I'm glad that we got some time to do that. We'll just share really quickly from the breakout group some of the main kind of insights that we've gotten from each of the stakeholder groups. And maybe we'll start with the ESOs first. And if Camille, if it's okay with you to share your kind of insights, maybe 2 minutes on what we've gathered from the group.
Yeah, I can do that. I think when it comes to some of the main challenges that ESO face, I think it was quite evenly divided across kind of the 4 topics that we discussed. The data transparency, capacity gaps that exist, financial sustainability, as well as the involvement of local government, but also the private sector. We delved a bit deeper into the capacity and financial sustainability component. I think when it comes to the financial sustainability, some more specific experiences coming from ESOs was a lot of funding available and focus on more short-term kind of activity-based programs, and expectations build around that kind of the longer term support for entrepreneurs are a bit of a given and facilitated by the ESOs over the long term, which then have to adopt and leverage their capacity to continue supporting entrepreneurs without really kind of having funders as a backbone of also guiding them through that. And yeah, on the one hand, sometimes that capacity is not always available. On the other hand, it also drags away kind of the attention of some of the other ways that ESOs add value to their offerings, right? So yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on actors there. When it comes to capacity constraints, I think there's a lot of difficulties around attracting, but also retaining talents, especially competing with larger organizations like the UN or the big foundations. It's difficult to distinguish yourselves. You're all fighting in a kind of a similar pool of talent for same talent. While again, the resources you can provide them with is often restricted, so you really rely on we heard some experiences around branding yourself around really this impact story and attracting talent in that way, and potentially some of the shifts we're seeing in the development space can also support talent driving a bit more towards ESOs and kind of the impact space, and less so in the big USAIDs and UNs of now, where jobs are getting more and more restricted based on restrictions in fundings coming from governments, but also bigger foundations. That's a synoptic overview. I'm missing a lot of intricacies, but yeah.
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Camille. We'll head on to the funders and investors side. Morgan, if you want to share your insights.
So we were cut in a good discussion, but I will summarize what we did. So maybe first to start with the group. So we had a diverse group with some investor investing in the pipeline developed by the ESO, but also some actors which are both investing, but as well funding some ESO. And we were also across geographies, so Kenya, Cambodia, South Africa. And the first question was about the relevance on the leverage point. And it was great to see that apparently we are spot on, and the leverage point identified resonated with the funder and investors. Then we moved more to the looking at the biggest barrier to support ESO. And when we took the investor view, what the investor was saying is that sometimes financing or investing in the pipeline developed by the ESO, it might be a bit tricky or difficult if the investor are not involved in the selection process. So really taking this investor back in the IC of the ESO would be useful to help investor investing in the pipeline. Then when we ask investor whether they could invest in the ESO themselves, here it's a bit more tricky because their mandate is really focusing on investing in the pipeline. So either you build yourself the ESO and it makes sense, either it's a bit a tricky aspect to ask for. Nevertheless, an idea was to maybe have investor financing investment people going into the ESO. So I found this idea quite interesting. So a good one to explore. And then we looked more at the ESO funder, looking at development agencies and how they could support ESO more or better. And then the scale framework was mentioned from Argidus, where they explained how donors could help ESO or support ESO more sustainably. But often it's not the case with more development agencies coming top down. So really this need for changes was highlighted. It should not be top down, but more of a conversation leveraging existing frameworks. And then the last question, and then we were cut, was looking at the metrics in data front, what would be relevant metrics to track. And here an interesting initiative was mentioned in Uganda, I think, where they are ESO adopting standards. So really everybody is complying to the same standards. So super interesting initiative, and that could be an initiative that needs to scale. So I think we could share also more. So Nikita, you can probably share later on. And then when looking at the things to track, again, not surprising, the number of enterprises which receive or are able to fundraise after an ESO program. That is one of the key KPI that was mentioned, which is relevant for the investor and funder side. And another one would be more looking at, for example, the revenue line. So when you start a program versus where you end it. So we know that it's always complex to measure, but it's really showing the impact that an ESO can have on an enterprises. So I hope it's summarized properly, and otherwise you can jump in.
Awesome. Sounds like a great conversation. Thank you, Morgan. Lastly, for entrepreneurs and others, Sophia, is there anything on your end for insights?
Yeah, so basically only one person joined our breakout room. I think, majority of the time it was just me and Lukman. But in that final minutes of the breakout session, we were able to get a little bit of insight. So in terms of which of the ESO challenges resonate with Geoffrey is a entrepreneur who wants to convert into an ESO because he's currently already providing services to entrepreneurs as a consultant himself. So he is rating capacity gaps as the number one because a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this, and sustainability as second, and public and private involvement as the third pieces that are the challenges. In terms of what can ESOs do better to support entrepreneurs, he mentioned they should offer stability and continuity to the cohort that they've taken in, and support them so that they don't drop off into the program. So there's no insights for the top barriers in terms of engaging with ESOs. And based on his personal experience, the challenges, so he ranked the challenges from the toughest to the least pressing. So that the toughest is sustainability. There's over reliance in donor funding. Second one is capacity gaps. talent retention, managerial skills. The third one is public private involvement, and the fourth one, which is the less pressing issue, is data transparency. So that's it on the entrepreneur breakout session.
Great. Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for sharing your insights. It's great to see that there's some sort of through line, right? When we see these challenges, it's really aligning. And it seems that with all these stakeholder groups present, we're seeing more of an understanding of these different contexts and maybe what kind of action steps we can take as an ecosystem together to kind of solve these challenges. So we also want to look at regionally, like maybe there's a difference in terms of how these contexts manifest. So we're giving 10 minutes to do another breakout where we will split into Asia and Africa. So the Asian region and the African region. And again, self-determination, whichever place you feel like, for example, you support more in terms of the region or where your work is more focused in, that's where you'll want to be. So we have the breakout room open, and then you're free to join Asia or Africa, the Asia or Africa room. Thank you. Aditi, is it open?
Rod, it
Hold on.
popped
Popped
up
up and disappeared.
very quickly and then disappeared.
Right.
No, just a second.
Okay. Thank you. So we're
It's
just
quite good.
working.
It builds a sense of anticipation and drama.
Yeah. Thanks for breaking the
Giving you
ice.
time to collect your thoughts, Ian.
Oh, that seemed like a double-edged sort of sword, Barb, in the area. Oh my goodness, but absolutely.
I have high
Thank you.
expectations, but I'm not in your room, Ian.
Awesome. I think the breakout rooms are open. Thank you.
Hi, if anyone would like to be assigned to a breakout room, just let us know.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that was a shorter conversation and we wish we had more time. And I'm sure there'll be more opportunities for us to share these challenges and these insights with each other. But for now, maybe we can get some insights from the bigger group first, Africa group. So if we can have, yeah, Camille.
You want me to?
Yes.
Or
No worries, I can do it, Ariel, if it's okay. Yeah, no, very, very interesting insights. And I think also some overlap with the prior conversation we had when at least my group focused particularly on ESOs. I think in terms of the ranking of the challenges, the financial sustainability and capacity gaps are by far the biggest challenges that are being faced. I think when it comes to these two challenges, again, we hear a lot around kind of a misalignment between the needs of these ESOs on the one hand and kind of the pressures or the prescriptive nature of the funding that is being provided. Again, the funding comes with it seems like a lot of strings attached that makes kind of the program more tailored to what the funder needs and less to maybe kind of the core value add that an ESO can have. And at the same time, it also creates kind of these short-term pressures in delivering that program, which deteriorates the ability of creating these longer-term partnerships that can really support ESOs in delivering quality over time and also help entrepreneurs over the longer time after they have run through programs. So yeah, a lot of kind of overlap with what we heard before. We also discussed a bit more kind of resonating to the third question, specific kind of these contextual factors that contributed to these problems. We heard interesting examples mostly from the Kenyan perspective. I think a lot around kind of a lack of policies or a lack of the standardization of policies that really drove the private sector to helping SMEs purely because it could benefit themselves potentially in the future. And I think to paraphrase Chris, the private sector really helps SMEs or ESOs as soon as they can become customers in the future, right? So on the one hand, that really reduces kind of the impact you can have, but this is also driven partially by just a lack of incentives coming from a policy perspective. And on the other hand, some examples where, in this case, speaking to the South African example, you have a bit more of these incentives. And that really drive kind of investments in SMEs that can attract private sector involvement towards that direction. But the changes that can exist in budget available for that investments through, well, changes in government, whatever, it can really deteriorate also the programs that ESOs can offer, and especially maintaining the quality of programs delivered that has been set when resources were available, and then when budget cuts happen, really having to kind of deliver subpar programs because the resources are just not available anymore. And so these pressures really, filter through to the ESOs.
Awesome. Thanks, Camille. Like another great conversation. On the side of Asia, so what we focused on in the discussion really was how government's involvement in the region is really present, and that's both like an advantage and a disadvantage depending on the context that the country is in. So there are some advantages where it's really helpful to have government involvement because that means that you have sort of not just access to funding, but different types of support that's there through the government channel. At the same time, for others, it means that it's more bureaucratic, it's slower. There's also more kind of control issues that are present when government is involved. And so it varies depending on the country. Like for example, for Cambodia, as they shared, there's more of that bureaucratic context that's there. It takes a while, for example, for funding to come in, to just coordinate with government as well. So that's definitely one kind of opportunity and challenge present in Asia. Another one is the kind of perception of women and also perception of what is a valuable or viable job. So perception of women, meaning how women are supposed to be in the roles of family and what kind of roles they're supposed to take, as well as what jobs they should take. So as Marta shared earlier, it's like it's either you're a doctor, you're an engineer, or a lawyer. Those are the three kind of viable jobs. And entrepreneurs is not like one of your viable jobs. So if you're a woman and then you want to be an entrepreneur, then there's that double whammy that's present in this context, because then you're really kind of going against the expectations that society has on you. So yeah, those are the insights so far. I know we are up on time, so I'd like to give time for Julia and Morgan and Michael to kind of take us through what the next steps will be on the project. Yeah, so I'll pass it on back, and I'm glad you got back, Julia, for the end.
Michael, you want to go?
Yes, we can hear you, Morgan. Or Michael.
Can you put it on full screen?
I think it's on
it's on.
presenter view, Morgan.
Yeah.
It should be.
Yeah. Maybe I can speak as Morgan pulls up the slides, just in the interest of time. So for us, we've mapped out the journey that we're currently going on, and I think currently you're thinking through what it would take to achieve some of the outcomes we're aiming to see in ESO systems in our target countries. And so really looking at financing is a critical component. So streamlining how funding gets to ESO interventions and kind of reducing that level of fragmentation that exists. Ensuring that there is diagnostics or problem solving constraints analysis done within countries to determine appropriate solutions, and not just plug and play and trying to replicate solutions that might not be context specific. And I think the rest, where we are right now, is at this point where we're determining appropriate leverage points and possible delivery strategies. Do you invest directly towards ESO support? Do you work more broadly and try to strengthen the ESO system as a whole? And lastly, how do we catalyze this evidence generation and knowledge sharing within the system widely? So I think we have subsequent conversations where we present more fleshed out ideas when it comes to these key inputs. But yeah, thank you for your time today. I'll pass it back to Julia.
She's not here, so we can close. You're here?
Yeah, I am here.
Julia,
Sorry about that. So first of all, I want to thank you very much for engaging with us today, for sharing your feedback. I hope that some of you will find it interesting, and we want to keep engaging with us as we will share what we learn as we implement the ESO pilots, and that we also design further this ESO scale-up program. I would personally love to find a few like-minded funders that are as committed as we are to advancing the sector towards a more sustainable path. So if you found this interesting, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And then we look forward to seeing you again, address all your comments from today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you to Morgan, Michael, Camille, and Lukman of the iGravity team for joining us today. And thank you everyone for such a great discussion. We did pull up the feedback form. If you can please help us fill it out so that we know your thoughts around the session. And then just really quickly, we just want to share our next sessions also at the network. So if we can please bring that up, Madura or Aditi. Awesome. Great. So in the next few weeks, we have a few sessions. So we are doing our healthcare state of play series where we look into some how best to support healthcare on enterprises in different subsectors. So our next one will be next week for mental health. It is a member-only event, but if you sign up to be a member and apply through our membership form, we can invite you to this event. One of our speakers is actually here. Ian is here. He will be one of our speakers for this mental health subsector session. And then the next one on maternal and reproductive health will be on April 10th. We do have a funding Flora session as well, which is a dialogue with funders coming up on April 30th. Again, another member-only event. And then for those who are based in East Africa, we had a discussion around investor and incubator relationships as a side event to SANCULP in February. And we're doing a validation session, something like we're doing today around the insights that we were able to gather. So if you'd like to join us, it's going to be happening on April 23rd. And then lastly, we have our session around making impact data and stories speak. So this one is around impact measurement and how we can tell effective stories through the impact data that we have. All right, so if you are an incubator, we are an accelerator. We are, of course, inviting you all to join the network and join us for these member-only sessions, but also funding opportunities that we release to members, as well as some programs such as our growth guidance program, as well as our peer mentoring program we're launching soon. If not, you can also refer us to other incubators and accelerators that you know to come join the network. We have a lot more sessions like this one where we have fun and we have a lot of interactive activities to get to tackle all these systemic challenges as an ecosystem. Right, so that is it. That was a long spiel on my end, but again, thank you to Julia and the iGravity team for joining us today, and thank you everyone for your insights and for being so very engaged today. We hope to see you in our next event. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.